Fellas, what if UFC champions lost their last title fight? Now, this is going to be if they lost their most recent title fight, just to clear things up. But yeah, pretty self-explanatory. We're going to be taking a look at every UFC champion right now, looking at their most recent title fight and saying what would happen if they lost it and what would happen if the opponent actually won and how that would change the UFC, how that would change the division that they're in. Let me know if you agree or disagree, as every time. But we're going to go in there first of all with the heavyweight division. What if Jon Jones lost to Ciryl Gane at UFC 285? Well, if Jon Jones lost to Ciryl Gane, first of all, a lot more fans wouldn't consider Jon Jones as the GOAT. The one thing that 99% of people who say that Jon Jones isn't the GOAT, the one thing they say is that he's on steroids so we can't be the GOAT. If he somehow lost to Ciryl Gane, especially the Khabib fans, they would be going at Jon Jones for losing a single fight, even though losing a fight doesn't necessarily mean you're not the greatest of all time. But if he did lose to Ciryl Gane, there would be a huge decrease in the amount of people saying he's the GOAT. People would always be bringing up the fact that Ciryl Gane beat him, and Ciryl Gane would be heavily promoted by the UFC. The UFC, if Ciryl Gane was to get beat, if Jon Jones was to get beaten by Ciryl Gane, the UFC are going to want Ciryl Gane to be this big star, the guy that beat the greatest of all time. So they're going to heavily promote Ciryl Gane. They're probably going to give Jones an immediate rematch. Not that he deserves it at heavyweight, but the fact that it's Jon Jones, undefeated, greatest of all time, they would probably give him an immediate rematch. Plus, it would sell pay-per-views as well because it's Jon Jones. And I doubt Jon Jones would want to fight anyone if it wasn't for the belt. So they'd probably end up giving him an immediate rematch. But there would be so many excuses from the Jones fans as well. Jones was old, it's not prime Jones, he's still undefeated at light heavyweight. The excuses would flood in. But if Jon Jones did lose to Ciryl Gane, like I said, the UFC would absolutely promote Ciryl Gane. Maybe Ciryl Gane would end up having a title fight against a guy like Tom Aspinall, maybe a Pavlovich, maybe not an Almeida, he doesn't deserve one, but you get what I'm trying to say. The division would move, and if Jones was to lose to Ciryl Gane the first time, I think they'd probably expect him to lose the second time, so that's why they promote Ciryl Gane. But that is if the GOAT, Jon Jones, was to lose to Ciryl Gane the first time. Light heavyweight, Alex Pereira. If Alex Pereira lost to Yuri Prochazka, there would be the Great Depression. Let's put it that way. The Great Depression would run across the MMA. Every MMA fan across the world would be hit with a massive wave of depression because we've just seen Alex Pereira lose again. But the most important thing is that even though there might be a wave of depression, the Adesanya fans are going to be having a wave of happiness. The Adesanya fans will be having a field day. You know, Adesanya couldn't win the 205 belt, neither could Pereira. Pereira's lost again. Even though Adesanya just got beaten by Strickland, the Adesanya fans will be mocking Pereira. People will be disrespecting him as well. People will be calling him washed at light heavyweight because he's not as dominant. But in terms of Alex Pereira's career, he'd most likely be aiming for one last run at the title. I don't think he'd immediately retire after a loss. If he was to lose, I can't see Alex Pereira just calling it a day. He'd probably just, go down the route of Paul Craig. I'm not comparing them both skill-wise, by the way, so don't start commenting that. But he'd probably go down the route of Paul Craig, where he'd be like, okay, I've just taken a loss. I'm only around 2 fights away from a title fight. Let's just go one last run at the belt. He'd probably be matched up against someone like maybe the winner of Ankalaev and Walker, maybe someone like Nikita Krylov, maybe the winner of Jan Blachowicz and Alexander Rakic, someone like that. Some fun fights at light heavyweight to get him an easy title shot. And in terms of Yuri Prochazka, it'll be the same thing about Alex Pereira's happened. It'll be Yuri Prochazka versus Jamal Hill booked next year. And the light heavyweight division, it wouldn't cause too much, chaos in the light heavyweight division. It's not like it's going to ruin it because this fight, honestly, half the people were predicting it one way, half the people the other way, but MMA would be in a very depressive state. Pereira would probably have to go for one last shot at the title. And Yuri would be heavily promoted by the UFC, this champion who's managed to beat Alex Pereira. I can even see the UFC going down the route of trying to get Adesanya, 1 or 2 wins at light heavyweight, and then he's immediately giving, Yuri Prochazka a fight against Adesanya for the 205 belt. But yeah, that's what happened if Alex Pereira was to lose. Sean Strickland. If Strickland was to lose to Adesanya, honestly, no one would really care because everyone was maybe would care. Maybe we wouldn't want to see him lose. But if Strickland was to lose to Adesanya, it's not like the UFC are going to be shocked. It's not like the fans are going to go for a massive wave of, oh my gosh. Everyone was expecting him to lose to Adesanya anyway. So there wouldn't be much emotion. You know, the UFC would be in the same state it was the weekend before. Adesanya would be running his mouth. Strickland would still be doing the same things he does, but I don't think it would change Strickland at all. Adesanya would be probably booked right now against Dricus. I know Adesanya said he wants to take a massive break, but let's be honest, if Adesanya was to beat Sean Strickland and then he had this massive rivalry with Dricus du Plessis, which makes sense, he's not just going to randomly say, yeah, let me take a 7-month break. I know he said he's going to come back in 2027. That's obviously a lie, though. But yeah, he's not going to take a massive break if he's got a super fight against Dricus du Plessis on his hands. The UFC would love it. The UFC would be like, listen, we've got this massive fight between Dricus du Plessis and Adesanya. It's going to sell pay-per-views, a massive headliner, whether it's in Africa, whether it's in, I don't know, Australia, wherever they put it. It's a massive headliner. And they'd probably just, you know, go at Sean Strickland and say, listen, mate, you've tried your best against Adesanya. Let's just turn you back into the contender crusher. That's what I like to call Strickland before the Adesanya fight. The contender crusher, beating people like Brendan Allen, you know, schooling people like Abbas Magomedov. They'd probably just continue to book Strickland against possible contenders for fight night main events or things like that. But that's what would happen if Strickland was to lose to Adesanya. Thank God that didn't happen, though. Welterweight, if Leon Edwards lost to Kamaru Usman, now let me just clear this up, this is after the head kick knockout, so even if Leon Edwards was to lose his most recent fight against Usman, the head kick knockout would still have happened, so it's not like Leon Edwards would just be another boring contender. Leon would still be popular. The UFC probably wouldn't want him to get a title again soon because he's not really good at promoting, but they'd probably match him up against people like Shavkat Rakhmonov, because obviously Shavkat's an upcoming contender. They'd probably do that for like a fight night main event. Maybe not, maybe just stick it on a pay-per-view as well, because that's a big fight. But yeah, they'd probably do Leon versus Shavkat in the UK. Maybe even match him up against Colby, because they're not going to do Colby versus Usman free. They're not going to book that fight because Colby doesn't deserve a title shot. Maybe they'll give Colby Leon Edwards, and then if Colby wins against Leon, then he gets a title shot, but that's what's most likely going to happen. We're also probably going to see Belal Muhammad. I know it's a bit, you know, the text is a bit cropped off because of my profile picture, just ignore that. But yeah, Belal Muhammad would probably be fighting for the belt back right now against Kamaru Usman, because we've got to respect Usman. He was an active champion, so we would have probably seen Usman versus Belal Muhammad late this year, maybe November, December this year, after Belal Muhammad beat Burns. And that'll probably be a headliner for a pay-per-view, maybe a co-main event for like an Adesanya pay-per-view, because I'm not sure I ever want to see Belal Muhammad headline a pay-per-view. I don't think anyone does. Usman would be seen as a much less dominant champ, though, because like I said, this is after their head kick knockout. People wouldn't be looking at Usman as the Nigerian nightmare. People are always going to bring up the fact that he got knocked out by a head kick. He probably wouldn't even have that much fights left. I can only see him having like 1 or 2 fights, even if he were to win that decision against Edwards. Edwards wouldn't be getting an immediate title shot either. He only just won the belt. So yeah, Usman will probably be booked against Belal. Leon versus Shavkat or Colby. And quite a few people were expecting him to lose. But anyway, lightweight division. Islam Makhachev. Now, if Islam Makhachev was to lose to Volkanovski at UFC 294, Volkanovski would cement himself as the top 5 greatest of all time. His only ever loss is to some guy at welterweight ages ago, and to Islam Makhachev by a close decision. So if he was to get his get back on 12 days' notice as a replacement and somehow beat Islam Makhachev, without a doubt, Volkanovski would be in the top 5 greatest of all time, above Khabib. But yeah, 100% he'd be in the top 5 greatest of all time. In terms of Islam, he'd probably have to, I don't think Islam would give it. I don't think the UFC would give Islam an immediate title shot. I just can't see that happening. I don't think the UFC would want Islam to have another fight with Volkanovski. Islam would probably be booked against someone like Gamrot, Arman Sarukian, around that area, and they'd probably do Oliveira versus Gaethje too. The UFC would probably do Oliveira versus Gaethje too, because I don't think Volkanovski would stay at the division. I don't see him sticking at 155. He'd probably go down to 145 again, fight to Poirier, maybe then retire. In terms of the belt, because the belt's now vacated, I don't think they're going to give Islam an immediate title shot after losing to Volkanovski. They're probably going to do Charles Oliveira versus Justin Gaethje too, because Gaethje deserves a title shot after beating Poirier. Oliveira was scheduled to fight anyway. That's most likely going to be the headliner, and it's a winnable fight for Gaethje. It's not like it's going to be another mauling from Oliveira's side. And then Islam would have to have one fight before he gets a title shot. But the Conor fans, the Charles Oliveira fans, the Volk fans, and a lot of MMA fans, like I said about the other Strickland or whatever fight it was, the Jones, I don't know what it was, but either way, a lot of MMA fans will be having a massive field day with the fact that Islam has lost a fight. People will be mocking him. People will be mocking Khabib. People will be just completely discrediting Islam's legacy, so the fans will be having a field day. But yeah, if Volkanovski was to somehow beat Islam Makhachev on 12 days' notice, that would be a massive upset. And fair play to Volkanovski if he did that. Now, talking of Volkanovski, what if he was to somehow lose to Yair Rodriguez? And before you all start commenting saying Volkanovski's last title fight was Islam Makhachev, and he did lose it, he did lose that fight. So I'm not going to count that because, I mean, he already lost the fight. There's no need to, say, go past it again. We're going to talk about Yair Rodriguez at UFC 290. What if Alexander Volkanovski lost to Rodriguez? Well, first of all, Yair Rodriguez had kind of just slowed down and crashed the party. And yeah, he just slowed things down in the featherweight division and the lightweight division. Volkanovski was most likely going to fight Topuria after this. So it definitely wouldn't be Volkanovski versus Topuria, meaning Topuria would probably have to fight another contender, or he's just going to have to wait like another year before he gets a title shot, which I'm not sure he's going to want to do at 26 years old when he's got this massive legacy in front of him. So Yair Rodriguez, he'd slow things down. Immediate title shot for rematch for Volk. They're obviously going to give him an immediate title shot. He's had this massive legacy at featherweight. Rodriguez versus Volkanovski 2 would be booked, and it'll probably be booked fairly soon because you know what Volkanovski's like. He doesn't really like taking time off. People would start calling Volk washed as well, though, because at this point he would have been on a 2-fight losing streak. He would have lost to Yair Rodriguez. He would have lost the decision to Islam Makhachev because that was the first fight. So there'll be a lot of people calling him washed, saying that he doesn't deserve to fight for the 155 belt. To be honest, if he was to lose to Rodriguez, I'm not sure if he even ever would go back to 155, but he'd definitely end up fighting someone like Ilia Topuria after the immediate rematch with Yair Rodriguez. But yeah, he'd probably end up fighting Ilia Topuria if he was to beat Rodriguez the second time. And if Rodriguez was to beat Volkanovski, I can't see Volkanovski sticking around the division if it's not a title fight. He might even just move up to 155 and start beating contenders there, whilst Yair Rodriguez had faced Ilia Topuria. So that's just what I think would happen if Volkanovski was to lose. Sean O'Malley, kind of same with Sean Strickland. If Sean O'Malley was to lose to Aljamain Sterling, I don't think there'd be this massive outrage. Most people were expecting it. It'd probably just... I can see him facing Chito Vera because there's a lot of title fights for Aljamain Sterling. There's Corey Sandhagen. They'd probably give Sandhagen a second shot against Sterling. They're not going to do Merab because you know what Merab's like. But yeah, O'Malley would probably face Marlon Vera. Leading up to the UFC 292, O'Malley was already building this massive kind of rivalry with Marlon Vera. If Marlon was to win against Pedro Munoz after coming off a kind of an embarrassing loss against Sandhagen, I don't think he'd deserve a title shot anyway. I know he's got one now, but I don't think he would anyway. So they'd probably just do O'Malley versus Marlon Vera as like a co-main event or a featured fight on a pay-per-view. Aljamain Sterling would probably have a lot more respect, though, because Sterling's got a lot on his resume. He's got Henry Cejudo, TJ Dillashaw. I know some of the fights were not the best wins. Peter Yan as well. Corey Sandhagen, and if he was to get Sean O'Malley on his resume, undoubtedly you've got to start respecting Sterling, and he'd just get a lot more fans, a lot more respect. O'Malley haters would be having a field day, and the hype train of O'Malley would slow down. Well, I don't really want to call him a hype train because he's literally the champion, but you know what I'm trying to say. The hype of O'Malley would definitely slow down. Not much people would be, I think as much people would be tuning in, but not a lot of people would be saying that he's going to be this big thing because he's just lost a fight, and he arguably lost to Peter Yan as well. Not much shock, very expected. So that's what would happen if O'Malley was to lose. And finally, Pantoja. I don't think MMA fans would really care because, first of all, the flyweight division, at least to the casuals, the flyweight division isn't seen as this massive prestigious division. If Pantoja was to lose, there wouldn't be much emotional baggage on Pantoja losing a fight against Brandon Moreno. Maybe a lot of people would be happy that Moreno won, but at this point, there wasn't really much Pantoja fans before the Moreno fight. I know they had a good fight, so he's probably gained a few from there. Moreno will probably end up fighting Royval. Royval's got a title shot now against Pantoja, so Moreno will probably nab that matchup, end up fighting Royval. Maybe he'd fight Amir Albazi, but no one wants to see that fight because Amir Albazi doesn't deserve it. He barely beat Kai Kara France. Maybe Moreno would even have a fourth fight with Pantoja because Pantoja, you got to realise, before this fight, he'd already beaten Brandon Moreno 2 times, I believe. Once was in the UFC, once was on like the Contender Series or the Ultimate Fighter or something like that. So, yeah, Moreno would end up fighting Royval. Maybe a fourth fight with Pantoja though. And to be honest, I wouldn't be mad at that matchup either because the fight was so fun. One of the best fights this year at UFC 290 was Pantoja and Moreno. The fight was insane. I wouldn't mind seeing that matchup. One of the best pay-per-views this year, to be honest with you. And the flyweight would be viewed as more interesting because there's a lot more Moreno fans than there is Pantoja fans. There's also a lot more Moreno haters, but because Moreno's kind of this promotable guy, I guess, you know, he's this baby face, everyone kind of wants to see him win, everyone likes him. Moreno would definitely be viewed as kind of this liked guy in the flyweight division, but that's what I feel like would happen at flyweight, and that is what if UFC champions lost their oh my gosh, I can't speak today. Lost their last title fight. Let me know if you agree. Did you disagree? Bloody, bloody, blah. Thank you for watching.